On the third night of our move-in, I saw it. 11 years old with no real prospect of what things were, I thought it was an actual ghost. I pointed it out to my drunk uncle, who happened to be my father since my actual dad had just recently passed away. They told me at the time that he had an accident, but the truth was, he downed an entire bottle of vodka and threw 3 bottles of painkillers into the mix. I guess they found him hugging the toilet with a note on the table bitching about how much of a failure he was. So yeah, fuck him. Oh, and my mom was in prison. So fuck her too. Anyways, my drunk uncle looked out and said he couldn't see shit, which was reasonably so, since the shadow was practically one with the rest of the woods. Mixed with that notion, the element of his vision spinning, which I didn't know about at the time, and you're looking at the perfect cry wolf story. Except, well, that was no wolf. That was the night I met Robert. Robert was a shadow. He hung from the branches, limp, deader than my old man, deader than my mom's future. Now, I didn't realize that he was dead. I just figured at the time that he was just really still. But the certain thing was, old Robbie's shadow corpse floated and swayed with the rest of the woods. Funny thing about shadows, they cast on ground, not mid-air. Wrap your head around that bullshit. So, Robert just kind of hung out there for a while, and as he did, my younger brother Freddie thought that it was the coolest thing in the world. He's the one who told me his name was Robert. Me, after a while, I took the high road and maintained the same notion as my drunk-ass uncle and just said it was just the woods being shitty. And that was a pleasant enough excuse to let my skin settle, but well, it was creepy anyways. I could feel it looking at me with dead eyes that pierced like mommy's syringes back when she was on the other side of the glass in the visiting rooms at the Slammer. The thing was definitely smart and alive, and floating, and dead, and creepy. Did I mention that it was creepy already? The longer I looked, the more I could make out the rope around its neck. That night, I knocked on my drunk uncle's door again. The creaking on the other side of the door stopped, followed by a furious, "What?" Uncle Lair, there's a dead dude in the woods."
"No, there ain't."
"Yeah, huh? He hung himself and he's making Freddy act creepy."
"Go to bed, Steve."
"Yeah, but the dead guy gives me the heebie-jeebies. Freddy calls him Robert."
"Man the hell up and close the blinds."
"Okay." By the time I got back to my room, the creaking noise on the other side of the door was back, accompanied by my aunt making the most peculiar of sounds. When I came back in, Freddy was on his knees by the window talking to it. He looked like he was praying to the damn thing. "The fuck you doing, Freddy?" "Robert tells me he can see us all day long," Freddy said with a happy-go-lucky smile that I'm sure would make an old Hollywood exec insist it become the next trope in scary movies for an unfortunate decade or so. I pat him on the head and looked out the window. Sure enough, Robert is still dead, and yet his shadow wasn't cast on anything. Divorced entirely from the earth and just floated in the trees, dead from the branches. I opened the window and started shouting outside at it. "Robert, you're making my brother act like a faggot. Knock it off with your shenanigans." The shadow did nothing, and yet as I yelled, I felt my skin crawl. When I was even younger than I was when I was yelling at a shadow, there was a dog in the neighborhood, a pit bull that was mixed with some other pissed off breed of dog, and the owners thought it'd be okay to let it roam the neighborhood unchecked, and this thing had it out for me. It'd growl and growl and growl and fucking grrr, but never attack, and it scared the pants right off me. Yeah, that's a proper analogy, because this thing felt somehow worse. Then Freddy started to cry. I looked down at him, and he was looking at me with an accusing glare. "You scared him away!" I looked back out, and I saw that he was right. The shadow was gone. Good riddance, I thought. The next morning, Freddy wouldn't talk to me over our bowl of Lucky Charms. Uncle Lair and Aunt Shithead came down and berated him for acting like a dick.
"Listen to me, you idiot,"
Lair told 9-year-old Freddy, which in hindsight was less than an ideal way to address a person of the said demographic.
"Ain't no dead person in those woods, just your sad brain being sad."
"Oh, I've heard this one before on a show or something," I said. Uncle Lair, expressing his inquisitive mannerisms, rather elegantly replied,
"What?"
"We see something. You say it's my imagination. I insist, but you won't have it, and then we all die. I think Scooby-Doo did that." "People don't die in Scooby-Doo," Freddy protested. At last, he's talking to me again. Aunt Ass Clown started laughing. Who taught you to talk like this?
His idiot mother,
Uncle Lair empathically replied. So later that night, Robert came back, and that's when Uncle Lair came in and looked out the window and said that dumb thing I mentioned earlier. He went back to bed, or at least made a bed out of the hallway rug. An irreversible sleep mode to say at the least anyways. Meanwhile, Aunt Junkie Twat was riding Cloud 9 on the grand highway of postponed misery, leaving me and Freddy to our own new pal, Robert the Shadow. I opened the window again and shouted at him. God damn it, Robert, I won't tell you again! It seemed to be closer. Before it wasn't at the very edge of the woods, rather he was hanging around near the edge of the woods. This time though, the bastard was at the very edge, on the furthest tree out. No details to be pondered, with the exception that the edges of it were totally refined now. This was a dead guy, alright. Why is he just why? Really? I asked Freddy. Freddy looked up at me with that creepy smile again. Robert says you like Britney Spears. Well, Robert is a lying sack of shit. He says you pound off to her video about school. What is pounding off? I'll tell you when you're older. Okay, so yes, I listened to punk rock and was really into that anarchy thing at the time, even though I didn't even know what the word meant, just that the A looked really cool in that degenerative circle. But so what? What if I smashed a Hit Me Baby one more time? We didn't have the internet back then. Robert was creepy, and even worse, a fucking creep if he's telling a 9-year-old what I rock the cock out to. Granted, at the time, I just thought he caught me in the act and just used this as an excuse to call me out on my self-indulgences. You little shit, I wasn't beating off, I was just really itchy. Is that what beating off means? Scratching a really itchy itch? Yeah. Yeah, that's what it means. That was that. I successfully talked my way out of getting called out for smashing the Shroom King. Meanwhile, Robert just continued to sway like a dead dude. I know he's just a shadow, but I could tell he was smiling. I flipped in the bird and Freddy started to cry again. Why are you so mean to Robert? Look, he went away again! Robert is not your friend, Freddy. Robert is a dick. The next morning, Freddy was furiously scratching his neck. Evidently, he was coming down with the chicken pox. Uncle Lair asked him what he was doing. I'm beating off, Uncle Lair. I'm so itchy all over, I don't have enough fingers to beat off all of it. You're gonna have to help. Uncle Lair gave me an accusatory glare, one that simply screamed, you're a fucking retard. I shrugged my shoulders and said, dude's gotta beat off, man. What do you want me to do about it? I heard stories about Uncle Lair, but never actually believed them. After the beating I took that morning, I was a skeptic no longer. Aunt Horse Tranquilizer was nowhere to be seen, of course. She made a habit of never waking up before afternoon. Something tells me it'd go down differently if she was around. We went to church that morning. I asked the priest about ghosts, and he told me that they were just dead people fixing to fuck with the living. I asked why, and he told me it was because they're assholes. They're pissed off that they're dead, and they want to ruin the fun for everyone that wasn't. Sore losers, I guess. So when Robert came back again later that night, I called him out on his bullshit. Look at you, totally dead and shit. You gotta make my brother get me in trouble? I ought to come out there and kick your ass. Go hang out with the other dead people. Robert was stationary. A breeze blew and the trees flowed with it, really zen-like. Robert didn't move. And at that ever-watching sensation I was talking about earlier, it somehow magnified. It felt angry. Not like Wrath of God style angry, but more, you're getting on my fucking nerves, you little sack of shit type of angry. Robert says there's a lot of candy where he lives, Freddy said. I love candy. I'll take a fuck no and a medium nope cola to go, please. You have chicken pox. Go to bed, you idiot. Robert also told me that you won't be able to boss me around if I went with him. You're really bossy, Eustace. Listen up, Freddy. Robert is a pedophile and he wants to slurp your popsicle. No brother of mine is going to get their popsicle slurped by some undead ice cream truck weirdo. Robert didn't make a sound. Still as the grave, as they say, or was it silent as the... Whatever. Then I got this really stupid idea. Keep talking to Robert the veal enthusiast. I'm gonna go out there and beat the shit out of say hi. Any messages you want me to, deliver? Freddy beamed up at me. Not so creepy when he smiles at me, and yet the notion that it had something to do with a special pedophile pissed me off at the same time, making my blood run colder than preemptively jumping into a shower as soon as you turn it on. "Tell him he's my best friend," he said with a blind and almost cult-like degree of enthusiasm. "Sure," I lied to him. "I'll tell him that." I snuck past my uncle's door, which was easy to do given he blasts his TV all night anyways, and went outside. It was colder than a witch's trampoline? It was cold out. And that night, the darkness felt like a solid thing, like walls. My eyes weren't as adjusted as I thought, but when they were, I still couldn't see shit. But I was able to make heads and tails of the yard anyways. I marched up to the woods, fully expecting to see nothing but trees, but damn sure as day, though it was night, there was Robert. I looked back to the lit window to see Freddy covered in his red spots as he beat off that itchiness which ensued with chickenpox as he continued to babble like a creepy person. Obviously it worked, but I kind of wish it didn't. Robert was scary up close. It was everything in me to keep my bowels from disobeying me. There he hung, taller than my uncle, towering like a beacon of stranger danger. He didn't touch the ground as he was suspended in air by that black eel wrapped around his neck. He had no texture, mind you, just inky blackness. Darker than dark, and that's saying a lot. A coldness overtook me. A sensation that proclaimed in a profound and yet simplistic language that I was surely fucked. I couldn't make out a face, but I knew it was looking directly at me with a sense of sureness that couldn't be contested. It knew I could see it, and it knew it could make me shit myself upon the mere slightest of impetuses. Still, my courage wasn't completely fucked before this thing. I stood up straight and glared like a pseudo-tough guy. "Listen to me, you ghostly shit dick. I know you want to stick one in my brother, but I'll cut your ghost prick off before that happens. You go hang out somewhere else. There's a farm down the road. Go stick it in a scarecrow, you creepy shithead." A strong gust of wind surged outwards from the woods. If you were a golfer, you'd lick your forefinger and stick it in the air to get a better sense of what direction it was coming from. I didn't need to do that. It was coming from the towering shadow that hung tall. The wind blows with a strong whooshing sound, right? This wind carried a voice, distant and old.
"Go back inside."
I wanted to tell the ghost off, call it out for being a douchebag, but instead, I yelped like a dog and booked it back into the house. I slammed on my uncle's door and he opened it angrily.
What the fuck?
"There's a dude in the woods. He wants to fuck Freddy."
You fucking jackass.
Uncle Lair slapped me.
Get your ass to bed and don't talk stupid crap like that again, or I'll fuck you.
I momentarily gave him the dumb look of surprised horror before I ran away to the sound of Uncle Lair questioning out loud the wording of his own threat.
"Hey, I didn't really mean that,"
he said before I slammed the door. "Did you tell him?" Freddy asked. "Look, I don't want you talking to Robert anymore. He's a bad guy." "Like a Scooby-Doo monster?" "Yeah, exactly." "So he's wearing a mask to scare people away from treasure?" No. He's just a bad guy." Freddy was excited nevertheless at that, which prompted in me a sense of unease that I took to Dreamtown with me. The next morning, Freddy was missing. Uncle Lear woke us up and asked us where he was. Shrugging my shoulders, I told him that maybe he caught wind that he heard he was going to fuck me and he thought that he was next, so he ran. By way of expressing an absence of appreciation to my words, Uncle Lear grabbed me by my throat and shouted,
"I've had it up to here with your shit, Jimmy."
At this point, I geeked out. What if Robert took him? "We need to check the woods," I gasped with his iron grip around my throat.
What's he doing in the woods?
"He's looking for Robert."
That thing you've been pissing me off about?
"Who's Robert?" Aunt Opioid asked as she came into the kitchen before vomiting all over the floor.
Damn it!
Uncle Lear shrieked, letting go of my throat and tending to Aunt Trash. Taking this as an opportunity to do something reasonably responsible, I ran outside and into the woods with Uncle yelling behind me,
"Get back here, Lucius! I ain't done kicking your ass yet!"
"Freddy!" I shouted as I ran into the woods. It wasn't a vast forest, mind you, maybe a quarter of a mile deep. Deep enough to get lost in anyways. "Freddy!" I yelled for the 12th time. "Ebenezer!" my brother shouted. I found him. He was on the branches of a tree. He had a rope around his neck, which was tied to the branch he was sitting on. "Okay, dude, what are you doing?" I asked carefully, as if one slip of a syllable would drop Freddy faster than my heart did at the sight of the situation.
Robert says that he has to go soon and that he really wants me to come with him. He said this was the only way.
"Look, Freddy," I started. "This thing you're doing, there's a word for that. It's called suicide. Daddy did it. That's why we live with Uncle Lear and Aunt Rehab." Freddy wasn't sure what I meant.
What do you mean?
"If you go with Robert, you'll leave me the same way Daddy left the both of us."
Come with me then.
"Nope. I'm sticking around, buddy, and so are you. Daddy made us both very sad, right? You'll make me just as sad if you do this. No, you'll make me sadder. Take that rope off your neck and you won't make me sad, right?"
But you're so bossy.
"I promise I won't be bossy anymore. Now get your ass out of that tree!" Freddy looked around eagerly, as if trying to find a reason to justify his actions. I knew he was looking for Robert. Lucky for us all, it only came out at night. Finally, Freddy came down. We came back to the house together, my arm around Freddy, who was crying into my shoulder. When we got back, Uncle Lear was pretty steamed. He smacked us both around for a while, though he was too junked out to connect them properly. Later that night, Robert was pissed. He was very intent on taking Freddy, it would seem. I woke up to Freddy crying uncontrollably.
"It's all your fault,"
Freddy shouted from the window.
"Now Robert hates me. He won't come back anymore."
I thought that was a good thing. I shrugged and told him that he'd get over it. Ghosts are assholes anyways. But, enough about that. Let's talk about how bad I had to pee that night. Like a racehorse. The piss I'd never forget. I left the room and passed by Uncle Lear's room, lights flickering in the cracks of the door as late-night television blared loudly at some talk show host bellowed scripted jokes into a well-trained crowd. Across from that door, there was a staircase downstairs, which at this hour was pitch black, but for the flickering lights through the cracks in the door, I could see it in a strobe light sensation. Amidst these strobes, I saw him. Robert's shadow in the stairway, his existence pronounced widely by the lights of Uncle's television. 3 flashes he lasted. 3 flashes, and then he was gone. My heart sank. I leaned against the door of my uncle's. The lights flashed again, and he was nowhere to be seen. Did I imagine it? Like an asshole, I thought I did. Robert never came inside, he only chilled in the woods, and oh my god, did I have to fucking pee! "Oh, make it quick," I whispered and bum rushed the bathroom. When you don't think about pissing, it accounts for jack shit. But when you do it to get it out of the way because of pressing matters, yeah, your bladder grows 3 times its size and you can piss forever. I was actively yelling at my prick, "Come on, you asshole!" And the stream was strong, endlessly strong. I hated it so much. Hurry up! Never ending, always flowing. I cut myself off. Enough was enough. I endured the burn within from having broke the flow and ran back into the hallway. In the flickering light, I saw that shadow again. Robert was cast upon the door of my room. This time, there was no questioning it. That was him, and not my mind. I bum rushed the door and threw it open. What I saw would be the scar my soul holds to this day. The piss I withheld, it all came out into my underwear there and then. Freddy's feet were dangling above his own bed, twitching and dancing unnaturally as his face stared outwards with eyes that bugged out of his head. Around his throat, I could see a rope that extended up and around the ceiling fan, which was hanging by a thread. And on the wall, cast from the nightlight, I saw Robert, with his large shoulders and still demeanor. I flicked on the light, and when I did, his shadow was replaced with Freddy's own. I reached up and pulled his legs, but he wasn't coming down. I jumped and grabbed, and finally the fan broke, and finally Freddy fell to his own bed. I shouted into his still face, but it was too late. Freddy was a sitting duck, deader than Dad, deader than Mom's future, deader than my sense of having a family. He left me just as my mom did. He left me just like my dad did. I was left alone with nobody but my abusive cunt of an uncle and my dear Aunt Overdose. I ran to the window in blind rage and shrieked out into the woods, "Give him back to me!" Through the veil of my own tears, I saw the bastard. Robert the Shadow, cast upon thin air, divorced entirely from the earth as he hung from a rope of equal shadows. He wasn't alone. A smaller shadow hung next to him, a shadow shaped like Freddy. It waved briefly before disappearing. Robert lingered, never moving a muscle. Eventually, he too was gone. I couldn't pinprick when it happened. I was so upset. Just 1 minute he was there, the next he wasn't. I never saw Robert again. Uncle Lair and Aunt Relapse were investigated for the suicide, and they found a shitload of weed. They put 2 and 2 together and decided to throw my worthless ass into an orphanage, and that was that. I don't really know how to end this. I guess I could say that I grew up, went to college, got my bachelor's degree, and got a job at a gas station because that was all that was hiring. To this day, I think about Robert, where he is, what he's doing to Freddy, and the helplessness of everything just drives me insane. The house it happened in has since been abandoned. It's still standing, but it's boarded up. I got this rope with me. I'm not doing it because I'm sad. I'm doing it because after all these years, Robert has gotten away with it. I'll start where it began, and if I go to hell, maybe I'll find Robert there waiting for me. If you're having a tough time in your eternity, Mr. Shadow, just wait. Your ass is actually in heaven until I get down there to kick the shit out of you.